back to God's Stories. This is going to be part two of a holy intervention. I'm reminded, that I was just thinking of today about how God's stories really, every one of us who are in Christ, we're a God story in the making. In fact, the Apostle Paul said in 2 Corinthians 3 that we're living letters known and read by all men and engraved not on tablets of stone, reference to the stone tablets that the Ten Commandments were written on, but engraved on the tablets of human hearts, the fleshly hearts. And so we're known and read by all men. So people are always reading our lives, and what's becoming of them and how we represent an image of Christ. We're as Christ, imagers, if we want to put it that way. Anyway, so to me, that's really the essence of God's stories. It's like what kind of story is God writing in your life and by your life for others to read? You will recall in the part one, I made it a little lengthy, so I'm going to try to keep this really short if I can. But I tried to include enough to give a kind of a view of what my life was like without God, because everybody who knows me now, I've been a Christian for over 40 years, so everyone's got this, idea of me as I am now, which is completely different than what and who I was and what I was about before I knew the Lord. So I wanted to kind of give a snapshot. I could have shared so much, which, no need to go there, but I'm just saying there's so many different things about my life that were just not good. So in any case, my point in sharing all this is that if God could intervene in my life, he can intervene in anybody's life. If he could save me, he could save anybody. So that being said, I hope you'll enjoy this second half. To pick up the narrative, I had left the house that was probably a few miles from the home church, and the two of the elders were there. Let's see, there's two, maybe three elders actually, and us three guys that were staying there. And you can get all that in the narrative there. But the Lord had spoken to me, and I heard a voice, but it was not like a natural voice. This was unlike anything I've ever heard before then or since then. It was not an audible voice. It was a voice that was inside me, just reverberating through my entire being. And years later, I tried to explain it to my wife when she was washing dishes. And the phrase that came to me is, his voice was as the sound of many waters. And that just came to me. And I thought, wow, that's probably as close as I could ever come describing the indescribable. And that's actually in the first chapter of Revelation when John, the apostle, said his voice was as the sound of many waters. I had to look it up. And that's actually the description he gave. But I went back to the house church that night and talked with the head elder, and then he recommended that I not leave after I shared with him what had happened to me. And so that's where we'll pick up the narrative tonight. But anyway, I hope you enjoy that. And please do share the video. If you have friends that you think, might find some value in it, feel free to share it. And please leave comments in the section below. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, or maybe something that God did in your life. But anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Thanks. Whole thing. And he said, would you do me a favor? I said, sure, Alan, I'll, anything. And he said, well, don't leave tomorrow. I said, okay. I said, what would you like me to do? He said, do you own a Bible? I said, nope, I don't. He said, well, here, let me give you one. So he reached up into his bookcase and he grabbed a leather-bound red letter King James Bible, and he handed it to me, and he said, well, now you have a Bible. I said, okay, well, thanks. And I said, what am I supposed to do? He said, well, there's a tropical fish farm that was donated to the church, and it was abandoned, and it's got a bunch of, fish pools out there with tropical fish, and there's an alligator. I'm like, oh, great, great. And he said, but anyway, there's a cabin with no electricity or running water, and there's also a 6-man cabin tent out there. And he said, what I'd like to do is have the guys drive you out there, and you all can stay out there for the night. And he said, then they'll leave you there in the morning, and he said, you can come back here for dinner Sunday. And so I said, well, okay. So remember, this was Thursday night, so it was Friday they were going to drive me out there. So I was like, all right. So I said, but what do you want me to do? And he said, well, he said, read the book of John and pray. So he said, read the book of John and pray. I said, well, I don't know how to do that, Alan. And he said, just read the book of John and pray. I said, I don't know how to do that. He said, just talk to God. I go, oh, okay. I can do that. So, it was a very memorable experience. The next day, I was riding out there. I think it was probably Friday afternoon, and it was 40 miles way out in the country, and we were all packed into this little Volkswagen Bug. And here you got all these clean-cut Christian guys and this one long-haired hippie dude, and they're all singing all these Christian songs, which was really, I'll never forget it, and they were singing, oh, do Lord, oh, do remember me, do Lord. And I've got a home in glory land that outshines the sun, and all these old hymns. And so anyway, it was just a blessed time. And, for a guy who doesn't know God, in the world without God, hasn't had any experience like this, and here I am just sensing the presence of God with these men and just rejoicing, together with them. And it was just an amazing time. As I said, I'll never forget. And the other thing, I was a city boy, and I remember that cabin, there was accommodations for all of us to sleep in there, but there was no electricity, so we were all using flashlights and stuff. And I had a bunk to sleep on. And I remember I had to, nature called, and so I had to go outside. And I remember walking out, and I remember sensing something above me, and it was the wildest thing, because I looked up, and the whole sky was just full of stars. So, I mean, it was incredible. I've never been that far away from, at that time, I'd never been that far away from the city. And so that was a real blessing. But anyway, the next day they left me there. So the next day I'm in this cabin tent, and I'm laying on my stomach on the floor of the tent. I've got the Bible open to John, because he told me to read the book of John. So I'm reading this, and as I'm reading, it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not made anything that was made. And in him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness couldn't comprehend. But anyway, as soon as I read that part where it said, in him was life, and that life was the light of men, it's like these words seem to somehow appear alive to me. Now, that is going to be very difficult to understand, but it was almost as though there was water. I don't know how to explain it. It was almost like there was water mixed in with the letters on the page, but it was like they were alive, and I was like, oh my gosh. So this was like a real epiphany for me. It was like, this is not a normal book. This is a supernatural book. This is God's word. So this was a really amazing moment for me, because, to explain, when I was growing up, I wasn't raised in a Christian home, and my parents in the master bedroom had this, king-size bed, and they had a headboard. It was a wooden headboard, and it had a bookshelf built into the headboard. And so they had a number of different types of books in this shelf, and they had, Shakespeare, Longfellow, the Grimm's fairy tales, and they had a Bible. And so my perception, as weird as it may sound, of a Bible was that it was a piece of literature. It was a literary work. And that was really my perception of it. So anyway, this was definitely a real moment for me to realize this was a supernatural book. It was God's word. So I immediately closed my eyes, and as I'm laying there on my stomach on the floor of the tent, and I said, this is a crazy prayer. I said, God, if you're really real, do something. So if you're really real, do something. And all of a sudden, I heard thumping around the tent. Now, I was not a scare-easy guy. Not by any means. and I was petrified immediately. It's like I almost had body memory from the day before, and I was just trembling, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm thinking alligator, right? So I got the nerve to stand up, and I went over to one of the window, zippered window coverings, and so I unzipped it, and I look out of the window, and if you can picture the rectangular tent this way. And so I stood up. I was laying, lengthwise, and so I stood up and I went to the side of the tent and opened up one of these windows, and I look out, and there are 12 cows, and these cows are in a semicircle around the tent, around that side of the tent. And so I walk out of the tent with the Bible open to the first chapter of John, and I'm looking at these cows, and they're all looking at me, and I'm standing right in the middle of them, and there's 12 cows around me. And so I'm like, what is this? And so I just was taking in the moment, and I felt the presence of the Lord, and I was like, okay, I asked God to do something. I said, okay. And then all of a sudden I saw, it was a beautiful sunny day, but way off in the distance, there was a dark bank of clouds, and there was a lightning bolt that shot down and hit the ground way off in the distance. And I said, okay, Lord, I said, you have my attention. And so I just stood there. And all of a sudden the cows started leaving, a single file, just one by one. They disappeared in all this underbrush and disappeared out of sight. Well, anyway, they were leaving, and as they were, I had a kind of a melancholy feeling because the event was ending, and I didn't know what to make of that. But anyway, there was and this little calf was left, baby calf, and then he just looked up at me and mooed, and then I laughed because it was so humorous and cute. But anyway, so he mooed at me, and then he wandered off, and so that was the end of that event. But I'll never forget that. Obviously, I mean, I'm telling it now. But that was very impactful to me. I didn't know what to make of it. Still don't know what to make of it, other than that I asked God to do something, and he did something. But he was showing me over a period of time, over the next several weeks, there were numerous events that took place where God was showing me that he was in control, and he was leading people to me and having people speak to me. And so anyway, that's kind of where that is. So I finally, that they sent Steve to come pick me up, the young guy who initially picked me up. And that was kind of a mistake because, we're both lost guys. We didn't know the Lord. And on the way back, we saw a guy broken down on the side of the road. And this was an older black gentleman. And his car was broke down. He ran out of gas. And so Steve said, well, hey, maybe we should help him out. I said, yeah. So we pulled over, and we picked him up. And it was probably about, I'm going to say, 10 miles or so to the gas station. And the whole way there, I mean, next thing you know, he breaks out a bag of, Acapulco Gold weed, which, marijuana, and he started rolling up joints. And next thing you know, we're all passing joints around. Now, if you can imagine, this used to be my lifestyle. But at this point in time, I'd been on the road for a number of weeks, and I hadn't been getting high at all, wasn't interested in it. I hadn't been drinking. I was straight for the first time in years, okay? I mean, I didn't know how to do anything without being high. I couldn't go out and throw a Frisbee unless I, was drinking or whatever. So anyway, so now here we are, just had this amazing event with the Lord. And this kid picks me up, Steve, and next thing you know, we're driving, and now this guy got back in the car after he got his gas, and he had a 6-pack of beer. So we all drink a couple beers together, and we're getting high. And it's just, well, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just like, oh, this is fun, But it was horrible. So next thing you know, we dropped him off back at his car, and we headed back. And by the time we got back for dinner, both me and Steve were we were toasted. we were not good. And so we were sitting behind a hedgerow about a block from the house in the car, and we were drinking coffee. We went to a convenience store. And we got a couple big cups of coffee, and I mean, strong as we could make it. And we're drinking, not doing any good. We are not good. We're high as kites. So we were now. Prior to this, I never had any conviction about getting high. I mean, I was proud of it. I mean, I told people I'd be getting high until I was 85 years old, and I had that kind of an attitude. And so I didn't care what people thought of me. If they said, you're a sinner, I'm like, yeah, I'm a sinner. I don't care, whatever. But now I was under such severe conviction. I didn't even want to go in that house at all. And so finally we waited it out long enough. The sun's starting to go down. We're late for dinner. We said, you know what? We got to face the music. We got to go, So we went up to the house and we started to walk in. The door was locked. They never locked the door. All of a sudden the door's locked. So we had to knock on the door. Alan's wife comes to the door, Steve's sister. She said, come in. Alan's been waiting for you. We're like, oh my gosh. So we go over to his bedroom where he had his office. And he had his back turned to us. And as soon as we stepped up to his doorway, he said, he didn't even turn around and look at us. He still had his back to us. He said, the Lord has told me you've been sinning. I was like shocked. But anyway, I wish I could have crawled in a hole in the ground at that point. And I was just so, I was so stricken with conviction. I've never had experienced anything like that in my life. And so I apologized profusely. And anyway, so I just told him, look, I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to, pretty much defile your house, with my presence. So I left. And I went down about 2 blocks away. There was a little park there. And so I was sitting up on top of a water conduit with my guitar and playing a song, and a guy on a 10-speed bike came cruising up, very clean-cut looking guy, short, neat hair, neat clothing and all that. And anyway, he had a sleeping bag in a plastic case underneath his arm. It was actually a Coleman sleeping bag. Of course, I didn't know all that at first. But anyway, he pulled up and sat there and listened for a few minutes, and he goes, hey, sounds good, man. And he said, hey, tell you what, I got to get going. He said, but I want you to have this. So he extends this sleeping bag to me. And I said, oh, man, I just kept playing my guitar. And I said, it's yours, man, keep it. He goes, no, really, I really would like you to have it. I said, it's yours, keep it. He said, well, look, he said, I don't know what your situation is. He says, but as I was riding by, the Lord told me to give it to you. I was like, wow. I said, I'll take it. So I took it. I said, do you know the people over there at the home church? He goes, what home church? I said, oh, there's one about a couple blocks from here. And he said, no, my wife and I are new to town. He says, we're just fresh in town. We just got a house. And he said, and I would actually have you over to stay the night at my house. He said, but we just had our first baby, and I don't think my wife would take a stranger very well. And I said, oh, no, man. I said, I totally understand. I said, but thank you so much. And so he left. And here I had a brand new sleeping bag, never been slept in. It was, had a waterproof liner on the bottom of it, just a beautiful sleeping bag. And I actually only used it that one night. That was the only time I ever used that sleeping bag. And this big concrete water conduit, it was a big round thing sitting on the ground. It was a little tunnel for kids to crawl through. I slept inside that, in that sleeping bag that night. And it wasn't long after that, and I'm not going to go into the rest of the testimony, how I got home to Connecticut and got picked up by Christians all the way. And there's a lot of other things that happened, but I don't want to make this a forever segment here. So, yeah, but that was the only time I ever used that sleeping bag. It ended up getting stolen from me later. So that's where we're going to wrap it up for tonight, and I'll resume in the next segment of God Stories. So thank you so much for stopping in, and I do want to leave you with a couple thoughts. I was in the world without God, as I've mentioned before. In Isaiah 65:1, it says, I revealed myself to those who did not seek me. And, that struck me, recently, that was exactly my situation. I was not seeking after God. If you know Romans chapter 3, it says, there's none righteous, no, not one. There's none that seeks after God. There's none that does right. All of them are gone out of the way. The poison of asps is under their tongue. Anyway, it gives a description of man without God. That was me. That was me 100%. And yet God, in his mercy, chose to reach out to me and to speak to me and to call me to himself. So I am forever blessed. And I'll share next time how I actually came to the Lord 4 years after this event that I've just described. So God bless you all. And if you do not know the Lord, if you don't believe in God, I hope that maybe this testimony will say something to you, because I didn't believe in God either. But he revealed himself to me. That changed my entire perspective, and my entire paradigm shifted. I was a guy who had studied sorcery. I had a lot of wacky ideas about reality. I had a girlfriend who was kind of into Eastern mysticism, not heavily, but she was kind of going that direction. I had 2 girlfriends that read tarot cards. My mother was an astrologer who laid out detailed charts, like she did the charting for horoscopes and all that kind of stuff. And she knew people who were really high up in astrology, and she could tell you things about yourself that only you knew if she knew the date and time you were born. So very strange stuff. So anyway, that's the kind of stuff I grew up kind of knowing about, those type of things. So again, when this happened to me, it turned my world upside down, and all of a sudden I realized that everything the Bible said was true. As I began to read the scriptures, God filled me with his Spirit, changed my life, changed my perspective. So anyway, there's a lot to it. But anyway, I've been following the Lord now for over 40 years and have never regretted a moment of it. But realize that our lives are short. It is appointed for man once to die and then the judgment. None of us, not you, not me, none of us know when our time is. We know that people die around us every day. We see shootings. We see all kinds of crazy junk going on in our world today. And also, you got all your nasty, COVID disease going on. You've got, these shots that are taking people out, so on and so forth. So you know what I'm saying. Our lives are very fragile, very tenuous. So what I'm saying to you is that if you haven't seriously given thought to the words of Jesus Christ, to who he is, the person of Jesus Christ, he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me, and no one can come to me except the Father draws him. I'll leave it there. But anyway, God bless you. Have a great night. Well, that's my story. Really an odd thing for the Lord to do, to bring a bunch of cows. When I said, Lord, if you're really real, do something. He sure did something. That was the weirdest thing. And there was a whole series of things that happened after that event, when the Lord really answered the prayer of that guy, John, when he prayed for a short, safe journey to Connecticut. I was hitchhiking now up the entire eastern seaboard, and I got rides from Christians. Every ride I got, the person who picked me up was a Christian. And anyway, I could go long and deep on the interactions I had and various stories within all that. But so the Lord did answer that prayer. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. And please, again, share with anyone you think would find some value in the testimony. And I wasn't even saved at this point. And it wasn't until another 4 years later. And I'll be sharing another video with that testimony of my conversion. So anyway, bless you all. Thanks for visiting.